there's 3 or 4 aspects of inclining or being an inclined elder that really stand out. And that was that people have a positive attitude towards aging. They continue to have meaning and purpose in their lives. Mm-hmm. They understand and value the fact that they need to have connections and community in their lives. And they also appreciate the fact that that they can serve as a role model and therefore leave a legacy for younger adults by continuing in this vein. So that's been an interesting observation.
Welcome to Onward Live, a live stream focused on encouraging you to create a life you love living now. Let's go beyond success to significance. Being clear on our why is crucial. It requires doing the inner work, finding ourselves, getting to know ourselves, embracing our inner child, shedding social conditioning, and letting go of perfect. We know obstacles make us stronger. We can dream big and take action. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. I invite you to tune in every week and engage with me and my inspiring guests. Invite your friends. Let's make time for what matters most in our lives. Let's move onward together. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight and my guest, Ramona Oliver. We're going to be talking tonight about aging with Incline. I just interviewed somebody a few weeks ago where we talked about zestful aging. I really like these topics. I had a friend, I still have a friend, who used to say, well, we're 50, we're getting old. And I'm like, I'm 50, but I don't feel like I'm getting old. I'm 58 now. I'll be 59 this year. And I just started a whole new career, which I really enjoy. So I'm really excited to talk with Ramona. And she says, for the first time in history, we're not only living longer, but everyone has an important choice to make, to commit to a meaningful, purposeful life of incline. And she wrote this book, which she so graciously sent me. It's called Inclined Elders, How to Rebrand Aging for Self and Society. So let me welcome in Ramona. Welcome, Ramona.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to be a guest, Emily. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this topic. So Ramona, tell us a little bit about yourself and then why you decided to write this book.
Well, I'd have to say that a common thread in my career, personal and professional life, actually, has been what I call the desire to support people's growth and development. I've always had a curiosity and a zest for living and exploring and learning new things, and that's obviously extended to lifelong learning. Careers that I've had, which have certainly shown this desire to support people's growth and development, have been HR director for many, many years, a career coach again for many years, and director of outreach for St. Edward's University, where I promoted lifelong learning and the programs of St. Edward's. So I really see my life on a continuum, moving from one age period to the next almost, where from what I just shared, that was more adulthood, and now it's extending into elderhood. And how I got here was a few years ago, while I was in my 60s. It was interesting. I think one morning I sort of woke up and looked around and realized that I and my circle of friends were continuing to live active, meaningful, and purposeful lives. And yet there was a cluster of people that really had bought into society's negative connotation that aging is all about doom and gloom and decline. And it really incensed me to listen to all this banter from media that was continuing to promote a youth-centric society. And so I decided to start doing some research in positive aging and started exploring positive psychology, anthropology, and sociology. And really it became very evident that we have almost had a paradigm shift in our approach to aging. And as we know, we start aging from the minute that we're born, really. And so I decided that I was going to add my voice to the conversation. And what better way of explaining to continue to live a full life than to flip decline around and call it incline, and thus inclined elders continuing to climb the hill.
I love that. But let me ask you a question, because so many of us have this inner critic. What were you like? What gave you the courage to write a book like this, to write this book, to go for it? Like, what made you think, well, who's going to want, did you ever think, like, who's going to want to hear my voice? Why should I write a book? Who am I to write a book? I'm just curious.
I've always had the ability to reinvent myself many times over as far as my career and also my personal life, and I suppose I've just had that inner voice that has urged me on to have the courage to make those changes. And in writing this book, I really felt almost a calling in a sense that I wanted to share my voice, my feeling about aging with people. I certainly didn't take on the challenge for fortune or fame. That wasn't the purpose at all. It was to hopefully create something that would inspire and motivate people to realize that, wow, I can make changes in my life that will make my life more meaningful and purposeful. And with the feedback and reviews that I've received over the past couple of years now since I published, that really has been the reaction. So I have gained the gift of writing the book in that regard, which is, obviously is a great joy to me.
Yeah, well, you're setting the example for us all, really, by writing it and by showing, yeah, you can reinvent yourself, and you can, just because you're turning 50, 60, 70, 80 doesn't mean that you can't take on new things. My dad started taking piano lessons. He just turned 88. I think he started taking piano lessons at 85.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's
So, I
cool.
mean, yeah, you can. So let me see. I got some questions here. What was the precursor? What led you to pursue the topic? And you just kind of talked about that a little bit, but anything else? You interviewed other people in this book too. It's not just you writing
I
it.
did what I decided to do, because there are so many books on aging that are out there, and obviously in my due diligence initially, I looked at a lot of, well, comparable books on aging. There's mindful aging, graceful aging, disruptive aging, and they all have a message and are all valid books. But I wanted to do something a little different. There's also been several books written by celebrities and speaking with other celebrities, and I wanted to speak with people that to me were ordinary people, but still extraordinary in their own right. And I thought that I'd probably speak to maybe a dozen or a little more than a dozen people to get their attitude towards aging and any challenges they were experiencing, and perhaps tips, techniques, or strategies that they were using to overcome those challenges. And it just exponentially, it just snowballed. And I met so many people from all over the US and even some in other countries that I spoke with. In total, there were over 50 men and women ranging in age from 40 to 100 that I spoke with. And of course, once I spoke with them, they said, well, you need to speak to this person and that person. And I'd say most of the people I spoke with were of the ilk that they certainly were inclined elders. There were some that just weren't buying into it. And for the purpose of the book, I decided to leave them out of the book. But it was a great exercise. And as I had set up my table of contents and what I wanted to include in the book, and it's broken down into three parts. First, attitude, which is the internal focus on aging, then growth, which is the external, and empowerment, which is society's take on aging. And yes, the first letters of the parts, AGE, spell age. So that worked out very nicely. But
Yes.
many of the people that I spoke with, and literally ranging in age from 40 to 100, uh, they have remained very, very close friends. And it was because of them that I was able to really bring value to the book. In speaking with so many of the people, it was interesting how, in listening to their stories, there was like an aha moment when I thought, oh, I can plug that one into gratitude, or I can plug his story into something else. And it just seemed to come together. And then what I wanted to do, because I'd done so much research on scientific evidence supporting positive aging, I wanted to show that, well, these are nice stories, but where's the evidence to show that this makes sense? And so I wove a lot of the scientific evidence throughout the stories to show that in innately these people were acting in certain ways unbeknownst to them, but it was scientifically proven through research.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, what's the difference? Why does one person say that 50 is old and we're getting old and that's why my bones ache and I'm just going to kind of give up? And another person is, 100 and living their best life. What's the difference?
Well, I look at it that there's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy for people that are buying into this negative connotation that it's all about decline. And the way that I looked at it was that there are three what I call calamitous C's that people buy into. And these calamitous C's are complacency, conventionality, and compliance. And if you allow yourself to be sucked into those calamitous C's, then it's going to be pretty tough struggle to climb out of that hole. But if you're able to, or at least get an inkling that there is light beyond the end of the tunnel, then you can look to the constructive C's, which are change, curiosity, and courage. And if you can have the belief that you can make changes in your life and you add that spark of curiosity to making the changes, then eventually that leads to having the courage to make changes. And in so embracing that concept, you're more inclined, pun intended, to live a life of continuous incline.
That's awesome. I mean, I just recently finished coaching a man who was 88, not my dad, but another guy. And it was awesome. He just wants to, my thing is create a life you love living now. That's what he wants to do. He wants to still do that.
Yes.
He's
A
well,
perfect example of
yeah.
an exemplar incliner is a gentleman by the name of Herb. He was introduced to me by one of my yoga mates, and she said, "Oh, in writing your book, you're going to have to speak my father. He's 99, and his life is just fascinating." And so when I eventually met him, and I said, "Well, I don't want to take up a lot of his time, maybe 15, 20 minutes," she said, "Oh, block off an hour and a half. He loves talking about his life." He came from Germany just before Hitler took power, and coming from a Jewish family, they were able to get him to the US. He was then enlisted very quickly into the army because he spoke many languages, and he fought for the Americans in World War II and actually did a lot of espionage work, just fascinating history. And I had provided him with a lot of background material initially, so he knew where I was going with this topic. And as he's sharing his story, and he's saying, and I was inclining there, and I was still inclining at this period, and I'm still inclining now. And he was 99 at the time. The next year, he had his 100th birthday, and I was honored to be invited. And at one point, he looked over at me and winked, and he said, "And I'm still inclining." So, and he's 102 now, and we're very, very good friends. And it was just delightful to hear some of these people's stories and how they live their lives. That he's a shining example, as your father is as well, obviously.
That's awesome. If you're watching this now, or even if you're listening to the recording later, message me or put in the comments. What are you doing now that you would count as an incline? How are you aging with incline? So, yeah. So let's see. Christine says, insightful, Ramona, you're more inclined to climb that hill, not just be over the hill. Yes.
I'm sorry, could you
I
repeat
was
that,
reading
Emily,
that
please?
comment. It says you're more inclined to climb that hill, not just be over the hill. Yeah, when you're aging with incline.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think gives people the courage to kind of go after their dreams after a certain age? You know,
Well, I think again, it's people and those that I spoke with that did have challenges in their life. They had something within themselves that just compelled them to make a change. Another story that was very, very compelling was about Polly, who admittedly was a very shy person, very introverted, and she had been a school teacher all of her life and in her comfort zone, and loved teaching. And yet, when she retired, she really was at a loss as to what to do. And I know, as I'm sure you're aware, that many people, when they retire, they're sort of in the same boat. What do I do now? Because we have 20, 30 years more to live of our lives. And she finally decided that she wanted to volunteer, and she knew this was going to be a real struggle for her. But she thought, well, what do I really have a passion for that I can apply in a volunteer capacity? And she loved working with veterans. She loved the idea of being able to vote. And she thought, well, maybe I can find a volunteer service that helps veterans, and especially disabled veterans, to be able to vote. And she did her research and due diligence, and she finally made contact with a woman who led this particular volunteer group. And she was as nervous as can be. She said, I just steeled myself to go to the meeting. And as I came through the door, and I was greeted by this wonderful woman who just smiled and just greeted me with such warmth that I wanted to help these people. And that just melted away any fears that I had. So, it's simple little stories like that that I think show you that if you take the time to want to make that change, you have that curiosity factor, and then it builds so that you have the courage to take the first steps and then progressively move from there.
I put myself on mute. I'm going to go get a glass of water.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask you a question. So, how does someone begin to pivot and shift their mindset if they're stuck in their old ways of thinking?
Well, again, that falls in line with the three constructive C's: the change, the curiosity, and the courage. Just to share a couple more stories with you that I think you'll enjoy to do with that. One of my inclined elders, Kathy, had a fear of public speaking. She had always been very nervous about getting up in front of people. And so the story I wrote on her is called Looking Fear in the Face. And there again is an example of wanting to make a change in her life, having the curiosity, and finally having the courage. And here in Austin, she took an improvisational comedy program, and she had the courage to literally stand up in front of a group of people. And as she said, had the courage to bear herself and not be concerned about people perhaps laughing at her. And for some strange reason, that just overcame that. And she's now moving on and doing other things, just taking those courageous steps. Another lovely story that I'll share with you is the amazing Miss Lee, who is a 97-year-old Austin woman from Palestine, East Texas, and she has an amazing drawl, which I don't want to replicate because it's so lovely. But she went to college and she wanted to be an artist. And it took her hours and hours to complete her works of art, as opposed to her fellow students who were just wrapping them off in no time. And she became very disillusioned and thought, well, I guess I just don't have the talent to accomplish this goal. And she continued and got her degree and went on and worked as executive assistant secretary for Exxon, actually here in Texas, for many, many years. And then at the age of 50, she was someplace and she overheard a conversation. Somebody was saying that Beethoven rewrote his, I think it was his 37th symphony, something like 30 or 40 times. And it just struck her. She thought, my goodness, this man was a genius, and he had to redo and redo and redo this work of art so many times. And she had an epiphany, and it was almost like she turned her thinking upside down, is the way that she expressed it. That here she'd been thinking that you're only born with talent. And she realized that it takes talent and hard work to accomplish your goals. So with that realization in mind, she continued on, and she'd had another dream, an aspiration to be a trainer and a public speaker. And so after several years of studying to present to groups of people, she became a world-renowned motivational speaker and traveled all over the world. And she did this by making the change, having the curiosity, and having the courage to turn her thinking upside down.
That's amazing, because like, I think that we kind of compare ourselves, our lives to somebody's highlight reel, or we look at somebody who's so far along, like, or somebody from the past, like Beethoven, and we don't really realize all the hard work that went into it. We just think, well, Beethoven was just gifted. That's why he's, could do that, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I love
Right.
that story, and I love how she reinvented herself. So, how do we get people who are younger than 50 to start thinking about life this way? And I'm wondering if we got them to start thinking about aging with incline, how that would make a difference in their lives. Even
Exactly. Interestingly, as I was working through the 50 odd people that were 40 to 100, I thought, well, I think I'm leaving out a certain portion of our population here. We have adults that are in their 20s and 30s. And so I thought I need to speak to a few of these people. And I soon learned that I was not to call them millennials because that has a very negative connotation. So it was young adults or younguns, as I call them. And so my premise was that I really felt that if young people had older role models in their lives, so people that were 20 or 30 years older than them, that were living active, meaningful, purposeful lives, they would see that aging is not all doom and gloom and over the hill and decline. And I spoke to about a dozen of people in their 20s and 30s. And invariably, those that did have an older role model in their lives felt very comfortable with aging. Actually, they were very excited about aging. It was interesting that when I think of legacy, I don't think of legacy as being something that you leave for people. I think of something that you, or something you give to people, but something that you leave in them. So you're leaving them with a legacy of thought, of feeling. One of the chapters in my book is called Leave a Legacy and Live It Now, because I truly believe that as older adults, one of our responsibilities is to live an active, meaningful, purposeful life as we age, because in a sense, we're living that legacy and leaving it for younger generations. So we're serving as role models for younger generations.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say my parents serve as a role model for me. They eat healthy foods. They take care of themselves. My mom more than my dad, but he's like 9.5 years older, but they exercise. My mom's doing pottery. They're just involved. They're just like, life is exciting. Their main complaint is there's not enough hours in the day to accomplish everything they want to accomplish. And I'm so
Yeah,
grateful for that.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah, it
awesome.
really is. So Christine says, she was a classroom teacher turned caregiver, and now she's still turning. Now she's a podcaster, author, presenter. It's frightening. It can be challenging and to be intimidating to try new things, to leave your comfort zone. And she says, I resolved to fail gracefully. Yes, that's right. That's awesome, Christine. So one of the chapters is the power of play. What's important about play when it comes to life in our elderhood?
Yeah, it's interesting. Within the power of play, I've included the whole concept of movement as we age, or at any age, really movement. I have never considered myself athletic by any means, but over the last many decades, actually, I've become very aware that movement is, as my Pilates teacher said, is medicine. So movement is medicine to move your body. And I've been practicing yoga for over 20 years. I do Tai Chi, Pilates. Nia dancing is something that I have been doing for a few years. And I started doing that because I wanted something that was a little bit more resilient and fluid. Yoga I love, but it's much more linear and static in your poses. So with the Nia, it was not only a more fluid and resilient movement for my body, but also for my mind, freer thinking mind. So that was something that I added. And all of these aspects of movement have been proven scientifically that increase longevity and any movement. And interestingly, the movement that has the longest statistical research on showing that it increases longevity is dancing. So
Oh,
that's kind of fun. And it was actually my NIA teacher that introduced me to a book called Play, The Power on the Brain, and it's a long subtitle, but it's written by a gentleman by the name of Stuart Brown, and he did a lot of research on play, not only in animals but in humans, and that it's really an integral part of our. There have been studies done with the Japanese people that live in Okinawa that have one of the highest longevity periods, lifespans, living over 100 for most of them. And their lifestyle is not only good nutrition and a lot of movement, but playing with young children. So there's that intergenerational combination. One of the expressions or quotes that I picked up that I really liked is that we don't stop playing because we grow older. We grow older because we stop playing. And
Mm.
that to me just says it all. I think as we get older and you're told, oh, grow up, act like an adult, and so you become more rigid, and you don't have that desire to play. And I mean, play can be described as anything. I know with my mother, for example, she was a rather reserved woman, but as she got older, if she was happy about something, she would just kick up her heels and do a little dance and jump for joy, and that was spontaneous. So
Yeah.
it just little acts of movement like that can add so much to a person's not only longevity, but just to the happiness in their life as well. So I really believe in the power of play.
Yeah, definitely. And movement, that is just so important. I've watched as my dad gets older, just, he said, my mom said, he said to her the other day, Emily's getting bigger, taller. And my mom's like, no, you're shrinking. It's just watching what happens when you get old and just the importance of movement to keep
Yes.
your muscles flexible, to just keep your mind going. I mean, he sits and he reads a lot. And my mom's always nagging him to just get up and walk and to move. I think he needs to do that
Yeah.
more. That is so
Yeah.
important. In fact, the other day I thought to myself, what's one thing I could do that would really impact all areas of my life in a positive way? And it was work out more, get up and move more, because I can tend to just like sit and achieve type, whatever. And so I think
One of the other gentlemen in my book is a gentleman by the name of Bill, and he is a student of Herb's daughter, Nancy, who was a ballet dancer and now is a ballet teacher, but a dance teacher in general. And specifically, what she's been doing for years is giving dance lessons for people with Parkinson's disease. And this is something that was started here in Austin, and it's just it's an amazing program that's now global. I had audited a couple of their classes, and they are truly amazing. And not only the classes, but just what it brings to the people that have Parkinson's. And the fellow that I met with, who shared with me what a joy it was to participate in these dance classes, said, well, when we dance, it provides lotion for motion, which
yeah,
again is
true.
movement, but lotion for the motion of your muscles
Yeah,
and your
yeah.
limbs. So it was quite a good story.
We have a comment here that says, valuing our older peers is really fantastic. We have a tendency to write them off rather than listening and enjoy them. And I'm wondering that some of the people that you interviewed, how did they feel about getting older and people listening to them and valuing what they had to say and contribute?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because a lot of people, as far as the aging process, really implement the concept of modification. And I think we all do this as we get older. We're still able to do some of the things that we did as we were young, modifying. For example, and this is my brother actually. He used to climb mountains, and now he hikes around them. And his adage is that I don't let the old man in as far as aging. And this was an expression that Clint Eastwood came up with, and I just loved it. And of course, he tagged on to it. So that's his expression. Now, I don't let the old man in. In other words, that people want to talk about decline, they can talk about it. I'm not going to listen to them. So that's his attitude. But then there are others where it may, what should I say, impact them to a certain degree. And yet, again, I think that if you surround yourself with positive people, I'm a strong proponent for positivity, that will certainly help. I know there's 3 or 4 aspects of inclining, or being an inclined elder, that really stand out, and that was that people have a positive attitude towards aging. They continue to have meaning and purpose in their lives.
Mhm.
They understand and value the fact that they need to have connections and community in their lives. And they also appreciate the fact that they can serve as a role model, and therefore leave a legacy for younger adults by continuing in this vein. So that's been an interesting observation.
Yeah. So let's see. I know Maria and her husband have this chess group, and they're teaching younger people and their parents and everybody to play chess. Did any of the people that you interview, did they play chess?
Yes, many do. I think that there's we have said that movement is medicine, but also there's the mental aspect that you need to keep your mind active too. And a lot of the people that I spoke with are very involved in games of that nature, or lifelong learning, especially, and lifelong learning can also be reworded to be expressed as long life learning. So, if you continue learning, then you're going to live a longer life, and that just stands to reason. And I would say that all of the inclined elders that I've come in touch with, and most people generally that are living active, meaningful, purposeful lives, they're lifelong learners, and therefore increasing the longevity of their lives, definitely.
Yeah. So what are some of the stereotypical mindsets with respect to aging? The
The
stereotypical
mindset of,
mindset. Yeah, what are some of the stereotypical mindsets that you've
oh,
learned?
okay. Yes. Well, of course, we have the old ages. We have the stereotyping, which again is because we live in a youth-centric society, and yeah, social media, late night talk show hosts are always bantering on about people being old and whatnot. There have been some surveys done. For example, AARP did one of the younger adults, so 20s and 30s. And invariably, and I would say all of these youngins that they interviewed for this statistical report obviously didn't have older role models, because generally, and 30-40% of the people that took the survey felt that as we age, everybody's going to have dementia. Everybody is ugly. Nobody's happy. It's just, and then there was another one that was done in the UK along similar lines. And again, that people are just unhappy. They're ugly.
Oh
I
man.
mean, it was so humorous, really. And as we've been saying, that's not necessarily the case, and it's based solely on your determination. You're responsible for how you want to live your life, and if you want to accept the three calamitous C's and be complacent and be conventional or be compliant to society's negativity, then that's going to be it. But if you say, I'm going to live the best life I can, and you embrace the constructive C's, then you're going to be much happier. And bottom line, I think that's where we're going with all of this. You want to be happier. One of the things that I'm a strong proponent of is gratitude. And that actually was one of the sections in my book. I met a delightful woman by the name of Betty, who, as she started sharing her story with me, I knew right away, boom, that's gratitude. The story, and I'll just, in a few words, share it, but she lived in Louisiana at the time with her husband, and it was the August of 2015, trying to remember, Katrina, no, 2005, I guess. She had already lived through one hurricane, which was horrendous, and here they're having reports that, oh, Katrina's going to be another one. She and her husband were in their 60s at the time. And the next morning, Sunday, they woke up, and sure enough, all of the radio reports and TV reports were get out, just move, get to higher ground. And so they quickly threw a few things into a suitcase, left most of their valuables behind. And one of the things that she did leave behind was this beautiful Waterford crystal bowl that she had recently purchased. It was a beautiful piece sitting on her dining room table. And as they fled New Orleans, and it took them what usually was an hour drive to get to, I think it was her sister's home. It took them 4 or 5 hours. And of course, everybody was leaving New Orleans, the torrential rains. And, it was a devastating hurricane. And weeks later, when they returned to just see the damage that had been done to their home, and they were walking through the oil soaked waters in their home, and she happened to glance over and just wondered as to what happened to her crystal bowl, and there it was, intact, sitting on her dining room table in a puddle of water. It was safe, it was intact, unharmed. And to me, that was her and her husband. They were unharmed, intact, as was the crystal bowl. And when she shared the story with me, and I said, well, this is just, such a tale of gratitude. And she said, yes. And we were so grateful. She said it was lovely that the bowl was there, but we were grateful that we had our lives, and we had insurance on the house. And to to me, it just epitomizes gratitude. She has such a wonderful attitude as well, an attitude of gratitude.
Yes.
She's one of the happiest people that I've ever met. She makes me think of, there's a German theologian of the 13th century that has the quote that if the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, that will be enough. And I love that because that is so much in line with gratitude. And gratitude, again, scientifically has been shown that it can increase longevity, increase happiness. There's just so much scientific evidence for gratitude. So that's Betty's gratitude story.
Oh, I love that story. I'm curious, did you find any difference? And I don't know if you studied, US compared to other countries, but did you see any difference in the way the United States talks about and approaches aging versus people in other countries?
Most of the inclined elders I spoke with were in the US. There were a couple in the UK, and really for the most part, the same concept as far as ageism, stereotyping, but people living a more meaningful life. I think really there's a paradigm shift that started occurring a few decades ago with lots of baby boomers who historically have promoted a lot of changes in culture and in the way that we live, and they sort of set the tone again. But that paradigm shift has been that there is that block of people that, to heck with what society says, we're going to continue to live productive, meaningful lives. And I did find that with the couple of people that I spoke with in the UK, but for the most part, the people I spoke with were here in the US or Canada as well.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, I wonder, I've heard this, and I don't know what you've found about it in your research, but where there big communities are being built where people of all ages live, like young kids and the grandparents and, more communities like that being built. Did you run into any of that in your
Yes,
writing of the
yes,
book?
actually I did, and that's included in the book under the section intergenerational living or multi-generational living. It's the same terminology. Did a fair amount of research in that, and there's several communities in Europe, also in Asia, that have set up that trend, and there's a few here in the US as well. It's interesting because years ago, we in our society had this approach that, well, we have to put all the young people together, we have all the old people together in the old folks' home, or here we have an area that's Sun City, that's where you moved all the old folks to.
Yeah.
It was almost like a siloed effect that you're all slotted into these pigeonholes. And I suppose some people have enjoyed that. I know it wouldn't appeal to me, but they're now finding that if you combine generations and together, they're really helping each other. It's a win-win because the older people are learning from the younger folks, and the younger people are learning from the older people. So to have that intergenerational approach, I think is a trend that will become a more of a prevalent trend as we go forward.
Yeah, I think so too. I was thinking the other day, I've got a daughter and she's got a boyfriend, and then I've got a son, he has a wife and Marshall, the grandson. And I was thinking, well, it'd be kind of cool to have a house or live in a community where they all have their separate living areas, but we can still come together.
Right. And there's a lot of people that are doing that now. People are building carriage houses or carriage cottages behind their property to have their in-laws live with them. And sometimes there's three generations. And look at what we've gone through in the past 2 years with the pandemic. There's been
Yeah,
more of that with people coming together.
yeah, yeah. Lygia says, I don't deny age, but I believe we really get very old when we lose or forget our inner child. Yeah. I'll tell a story about that a little bit. Maybe. So I was at the aquarium this weekend with Marshall, my grandson, who's 5, and there was this ramp and he wanted to tumble down it. And initially I'm like, no, we don't tumble down ramps. And then I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Why not? And one of my clients asked me, did I tumble too? Because I'm all about creating a life I love living. And I'm like, well, no, I didn't tumble because I get dizzy when I tumble. But it was kind of cool to just see him tumbling down. I mean, he's
Yes, no fear at all. No.
no.
And interestingly, another story from the amazing Miss Lee. she always talks about keeping the inner child alive, and that's one of the reasons why she's lived to such an old age. She shared that as she was growing up and getting older and becoming more of an adult and still being the very whimsical, fun-loving person that she was, and so many of her friends would say to her, "Oh, for heaven's sakes, Lee, are you ever going to grow up?" And she said, and years later, here I am, I'm still alive and they're all dead.
Mm.
Because she keeps the inner child alive. And that's that power of play again, right?
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. So, like, let's say somebody has this mindset of, "Oh, I'm getting old." How do they shift it?
Well, I've looked at that, how we can change our society and us. A lot of the research that I did has shown that for most of our lives, really going back into the 1900s and into the 20th, 21st century, we've lived in what we call life stages. So it's very, again, siloed. You get your education, you get a job and work and have your family, and then you retire, sort of three distinct stages, no moving about. You just move from one to the other. And there's more of a trend now to look at life as being in as a life course, which is more fluid and resilient. And for myself, for example, I certainly didn't follow the rigid pathways, education, work, retirement, because I went back to school as an adult in my 50s and earned my 2 degrees, and more people are doing that nowadays. So there is that approach to look at it as more of a life course. There's a very interesting book written by an English author, two actually, that's called The 100-Year Life, on the basis that we are looking at living to 90, 100, if not more. And what are we going to do with that extra time? And to make changes, that's where your reinvention comes into play again, making changes in your, I think on the basis that we no longer, that the old model that we were using is not working for us anymore because it was based on a shorter time span for our longevity, that society needs to change the way that they look at life, changing the from a life stages model to a life course, also changing education and other models. Very interestingly, Stanford University in California, they have a Center for Longevity where they have actually started piecing together what they're calling a new map of life based on a new model, and they have participants from all over the world contributing to this, and it's fascinating. So that's an interesting piece for society to look at. But when it comes right down to you and me and what we can do, I go back to the basics that I've proposed throughout the book. So in looking at having a positive attitude, making the choices that matter in your life. So one of them is having that positive attitude, having a purpose and having a plan to accomplish that purpose. And when I look at purpose, it can be what I call little p or big P. It can be a really powerful, strong, serious project, or even your job for that matter, or it can be a very simple program that you work on, or even having a regular time that you spend with your grandchildren. That's a purpose. There's a Japanese expression called ikigai, which in Japanese means a reason for getting up in the morning. And when you boil it right down to it, I think purpose not only is fulfilling and gratifying for individuals, and you need that in your life, but it's also it's that purpose for getting up. But you need a plan to be able to achieve that purpose. I think you need to embrace gratitude, looking at the things in your life that you're thankful for. There's an excellent little exercise called Good Things. And at the end of the day or the next morning, you can sit down and just jot down 3 good things that happened to you. They can be very simple, and it's been proven, again, positive psychology, that if you follow this for a few weeks or a month, you'll notice a change in your life, a more positive feeling of gratitude. And of course, the extension of gratitude is resilience. So, in looking at those aspects, also in appreciating that you need connections and community in your life. And again, that's statistically been proven over time that having connections in your life is important. There was a research study started in the 40s or 50s by Harvard University looking at reasons why people lived longer lives and what brought them the most happiness, and it's still in existence. There's been a book written on it, and invariably it's relationships that you have with people. If you slow down on your relationships, so you don't have any, that can really slow down on your happiness, your longevity. It's interesting that over the period that we've had the pandemic, fortunately, I think more people heard of Zoom, learned what it was and learned how to use it and,
Yeah,
and
yeah, for
anything
sure.
else, because it still kept you connected to people. Mind you, it was one dimensional, but still you had a supportive community. So those are some of the ways that we can really continue to live inclined lives.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. One of the viewers asked, were most of the folks you interviewed, or did they have a robust social contacts, or were they more introspective and less social, or was it a mix?
Yeah, a combination. I spoke of Polly earlier, who, when I met her, she was very outgoing, fun. You know, when you get people, when you're able to open them up and they talk about themselves, it's amazing what they'll talk about. And she was a very warm person, but when she shared with me, and I mean, this is very private for her, that she was very introverted and shy. And look at what she did in being able to push beyond her comfort level and get that volunteer position. The other one, Kathy, who looked fear in the face because she was so petrified of having people laugh at her if she stood up in front of a group of people. She was another one who is more introverted than extroverted. Some very outgoing. That my friend's Darlene is, she's just an amazing woman, and she has a group actually called the Amazing Women Alliance, and she's just one of your outgoing people that nothing can hold her back. So there was a combination of people, and some, I actually, it was interesting through the pandemic. I learned that, well, I've always considered myself, and most people think I'm an extrovert, I'm actually an ambivert, which is a combination of extrovert and introvert. I realized that, gee, I'm pretty happy being at home working on my projects. But then at some point I'd say, oh, I need some people in my life. And I'd either get on a Zoom call or, get together with some people. So that was an interesting realization that I had. But I think you'll find people, there's a cross section, and there certainly were with the over 50 that I spoke with.
Yeah. You have a good section at the back of your book called resources. And I think gratitude's in there, creativity. You have a lot of, law of attraction, positive affirmations, a lot of good tips for people, a lot of good resources in this book.
Yeah, I did. I set that up. I actually set the book up as what I thought would be a workbook format, which could be used on an individual basis. So you could read from beginning to end, A to Z, or you could pick out sections that caught your interest and then go back and read others. There are also personal reflections at the end of each chapter, and then the resources, they refer back to where you can relate to them in the book as well. And my plan initially, before the pandemic set in, was that I was going to focus to a large degree on people living in independent homes, assisted living homes, and that. But then, of course, when people were in lockdown, that just wasn't
Oh,
possible.
yeah.
So I got creative and I did podcasts and a lot of other things. But it's now turning around again, and I'm starting to get invitations to go into those venues, which I think will be very, very enjoyable. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to write this book?
Well, from beginning to end, from when the seed was first germinating to when it was published, probably 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot because you did all that research. That research I think would drive me crazy. Do you like doing
Well, it was a labor of love overall, and one of the gifts that I derived from it was meeting over 50 amazing people that I've kept in touch with. So that was exciting.
That's
Very.
awesome. So here, someone with Maria was asking, what's the term for both extrovert and introvert? Ambivert? I think that's what you said.
Ambivert.
Ambivert.
You sort of get your energy from both areas.
Yeah. So let's see. I want to share your website. This is your website, and they can order the book from your website.
Yes, yes. The book is available at all major booksellers like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Apple. It's also available through my book publisher, which is Book Baby. And if you the links to both of those are at the website. If you order it through my publisher, you get a 25% discount.
Okay, that's good incentive there. And this is the name of the book, Incline to Elders, How to Rebrand Aging for Self and Society. And this is what it looks like. Oh, and you've got on here Book Excellence Award. Congratulations.
Yes, I did. I was thrilled last year. I submitted to several book award groups, and I was thrilled to receive a Book Excellent Award from that organization, which is a global organization, and they uh, awarded me on the basis of writing style, overall book design, and overall marketing as well. So I was thrilled to receive that. Yeah.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about the cover, like this picture here.
Well, as I started working on the concept of the title, and I then started defining who inclined elders are, which are basically men and women who have not accepted society's negative connotation but want to continue living a meaningful life. And I have a very dear friend who helped me create the website that I have. And one of the pictures that she has on it is this ascending hill, which is representative of continuing to climb the hill. There's other material included on the website as well. And as I got to the point where I needed to have a cover, another friend of mine who is a prolific author, she works with a graphic artist in Spain who is amazing. And I shared with Adina my concept for the book. And of course, she reviewed the website, and very quickly she came up with that design, and I just loved it because to me it's climbing the hill, and it's meandering a little bit, so it's not just straight and narrow. It's that life course thing. And I've had people say, wow, it's like an oil painting where you just want to step into it and climb the hill. So I was very pleased with it. And she also included a few birds that are flying in the air, which is a symbol of freedom to continue to live a full and meaningful life.
Yeah, I love that, Ramona. So people can reach you by this email, right? And
I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah. Yeah. And order the book and and read it. I think it's awesome. I'm not done with it yet, but I'm still reading through it and I've really enjoyed it. Here's one I just opened up to this. Andrea, policewoman to entrepreneur. Policewoman to entrepreneur, somebody in your book. I just love the different stories you have, the eternal dancer, all the different people that you highlight. So
well, I thank you again for the opportunity to present today, Emily.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. It's been fun.
Yeah. Any last words of wisdom before we close up?
Actually, I will. I spoke of Herb earlier. He is the exemplar inclined elder who's now 102. And he was the one that moving into the independent living home, walked into the dining room the first night and looked around and said, oh my God, they're all so old, meaning the people that were in the dining room, because he's still young at heart. Yeah. So I wrote this little rhyme, which goes, I look in the mirror and who do I see? It's my younger self smiling back at me. While society dictates a time of decline, I follow my soul and choose to incline.
I love that, Ramona. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
And thanks for being on the podcast. So, all right, I'm going to put you in the green room and then we're going to wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate you. And for all of those who listen to this later, just put #replay in the comments and let me know that you listened to it, or you can listen to it when it comes out as a regular podcast. I really appreciate everybody for watching. Thanks, Maria. You said great discussion. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I was happy to have Ramona on my podcast. It's taken a while to get her here just because I have a backlog, but we've been talking about this. So I think it was 6 months she's been waiting to be on my show. So I appreciate your patience, Ramona. Thank you, Dee. Great conversation, Emily and Ramona. Thank you. Appreciate you guys watching. I'm going to play this outro. You're welcome, Ligia. Thank you for watching from Costa Rica. So I'm going to play this outro and I'll let you guys go. I really appreciate you. I'll see you next Wednesday, 7:30, same time, same place. Onward Live is sponsored by Emily Harmon Coaching and Consulting. Visit my website, emilyharmon.com, to learn more about me and my coaching programs. I'd love to help you create a life you love living. Remember, every adversity is our own personal university. Sometimes the lessons are difficult, And we must learn from our experiences. Vulnerability is your superpower. You are lovable and worthy. And we discuss these topics and more because professional is personal. Thank you for joining us and engaging with me and my guest. I look forward to seeing you next time.